wiped out by today's announcement?
Yeah, well, look, if we'd been running this show, we wouldn't be in this position in the first place. But the point is, like night follows day, I suspect there will be a windfall tax in the coming days. And the question is, why wasn't it announced months ago to support people? And why, for example, for the very poorest, would you cut universal credit, for example?
Okay, so assuming that we do get some kind of package from the Treasury, whether we call it an emergency budget or not, what is the single most important thing in this situation that you'd like to see?
Look, I think that at this stage we need a significant windfall tax. That's what we need, and that's what we're arguing for.
And what about on the other side, in terms of how you compensate, how you help people who cannot pay their food and heating bills?
Well,
what do you need to do to help them?
Well, reverse the universal tax credit. We think that they were wrong in terms of the warm homes grant, which really will support people as we head into the winter.
Everybody will be watching to see what happens. David Lammy, thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to me. You're listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC, and the time is 6:30. Emilia Cox, of course, has your news.
A former cabinet minister has told LBC the Chancellor will announce more support for households struggling with their bills soon. The energy regulator has warned the price cap could rise to £2,800 in October. A teenage boy has been warned he faces a life sentence after being convicted of the murder of 12-year-old Ava White. The 14-year-old, who can't be named because of his age, stabbed the schoolgirl in Liverpool last November. And Sarah Everard's killer has denied 4 charges of indecent exposure in the run-up to her murder. 49-year-old Wayne Cousins is currently serving a whole life term following Sarah's death last March. LBC weather, a clear night for much of the UK. Showers moving into Northern Ireland and western parts overnight. A low of 7 degrees.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport M25.
We need a few more customers. And that's right. Well, quite a few people follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And then it hits us. If we use GoDaddy, we can connect our site to our social pages. So now my dine is starting to go a little viral. And now everyone's like, hashtag my dine, hashtag amazing. Can I get some plantain and kalulu? All the help and tools you need to grow online. GoDaddy.
Welcome to everyone's favorite game show, the Motorway Way, where car dealers compete to give you the best price for your car. Gary, are you ready to sell?
I am now.
Thousands of car dealers are waiting to bid.
£11,000. £11,500.
You've sold your car.
And I got more money than expected. No way!
Yes way.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Free. Motorway, the way to sell your car.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
56% of customers received a higher sale price than the previous offers. Everyone can make little changes to waste less. And at McDonald's, we're no different.
Like reusing our old cooking oil to make biodiesel.
That helps fuel my truck. Or recycling my used McCafe cup at McDonald's.
To make a birthday card for me. Thanks, Dad.
It's the start of a plan to recycle and reuse even more. Because we know when you change a little, you change a lot. Recycling units available in UK restaurants. Search National Cup Recycling Scheme. Includes cards and other products.
Tax credits are ending, and the Department for Work and Pensions will be moving people across to Universal Credit by 2024. Search Understanding Universal Credit to find out more. Eligibility criteria apply.
This is LBC Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Welcome back, and the time is 6:33. I spoke to Tom Tugendhat earlier. He's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and Conservative MP for Tunbridge and Malling, and I asked him, as an Afghan veteran himself, what it felt like, this botched UK withdrawal from Afghanistan. He's chairman of the committee which produced the report we were talking about.
Andrew, look, I do, and I spent 4 years in Afghanistan. I spent a year or so as a diplomat, and I spent a few years as a soldier in Afghanistan, and so it was an incredibly painful report to write. It was painful not just because I'm writing about friends, I'm writing about people I knew who were left behind, people who were abandoned. And the report is about the failure that our government, our country had at that time, and so it's, for me, it was extraordinarily personal, and I have to say it was extremely sad to have to write it. This is not a report I wanted to write. This is a report that sadly had to be written.
How badly did we let people down as a country?
Well, look at the numbers. I mean, it's unquestionable that there are hundreds, possibly a few thousand people who are still in Afghanistan who haven't been able to get out, and the reason the numbers are vague is not just because we're not absolutely certain because the Foreign Office didn't keep records, but also because sadly many people have been killed. We know that in Lashkargah, the town that I lived in for the best part of a year, more than a year, there were people who were murdered in the gutter, dragged out of their homes in the night and shot by the Taliban. This is a heartbreaking situation. We know also there are people, even now in places like Pakistan, the Pakistani government has done a lot to look after people, but the reality is there are people who are stuck there who really should be coming to the UK.
So whose responsibility is this?
Well, this is as ever, the problem is that this is multiple responsibilities. And while the evacuation was planned effectively by the military and done so well in advance, the reality is that unless you have the numbers, unless you have the biometric data, unless you have the specific information on who needs to be evacuated at what time and where from, then it's very difficult to do this. And I'm afraid we didn't keep proper records. This is one of those moments where it wasn't just a problem on the day, it was a build-up of problems over years which led to the incident.
I'm asking because you say in the report that Sir Philip Barton, the Foreign Secretary, should resign. I'll ask you why.
Yes, you can. We were critical as well, as you'll notice in the report. We are critical of ministers, but the reason we focus on Sir Philip and not on ministers is for two reasons. One, the Foreign Secretary has already been moved, so there's not much.
He was on holiday too, of course.
Absolutely, and we're extremely critical of that as well. Let's be clear, this is a report written not by me, not by Conservative MPs, but by MPs across the House, Conservative, Labour, and indeed as a member of the SNP on the committee. We're very critical of that. But we're particularly critical of Philip Barton because we asked a series of questions, of course, during this inquiry process. Philip Barton came before a committee on a few occasions. And not only did we feel that, first of all, he was on holiday and didn't come back off holiday, even when the Foreign Secretary did, but secondly, we asked about the decision-making.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
To understand what went wrong at that time, how the decisions were made and where decisions could be improved, what processes worked, what didn't. And I'm afraid we got answers that we didn't feel matched the clarity that the British people deserve.
He wasn't straight with committees, is what you're saying. You look back.
Keep right to stay on M4.
You did resign, of course. How big a mistake how big a disaster do you think this evacuation was compared to the Falklands War? And do you think ministers ought to have resigned at the time?
Well, Lord Carrington resigned because he failed to predict something that nobody predicted. This was different. Not only did everybody predict it, but it was signposted for years in advance. When now President Biden was Vice President Biden, he spoke against, as you all remember, he spoke against the troop increases that President Obama ordered at the time. And when President Trump was elected, he spoke about the withdrawal from Afghanistan very clearly. Indeed, the UK was part of, not always a key member of, but certainly an enabler of at various points, the talks between the Trump administration and the Taliban, which led to the beginnings of the discussions on withdrawal. And when President Biden was elected, those talks were not resiled. Unlike Al-Assad, who was the negotiator, remained on. The talks continued. The process of negotiation with the Taliban continued. And President Biden made it very clear that he was planning to withdraw before the anniversary of 9/11, the 20th anniversary. And so none of this should have been a surprise, and yet we were unprepared.
You say in the report that you haven't heard a plausible explanation that the Prime Minister didn't approve the evacuation of dogs over humans. Is it your view that Boris Johnson intervened to make sure that the dogs were put ahead of human beings?
Now, what's not clear, and I'm afraid this is where I can only tell you what we found, not more than that, we can only present the facts as we found them, which is that there was a belief in the Foreign Office, there was a belief in the senior officials that this was a direction, an instruction from number 10, and although we found obfuscation and frankly dissimulation from senior officials in the Foreign Office and sadly also the National Security Advisor, we found ourselves unable to answer that question. Now, on one level, we should be clear, this isn't an attack or a criticism of an Al-Azhar charity. It is perfectly reasonable for people who run charities to lobby for the interest which they're campaigning for. That's absolutely reasonable. What isn't reasonable, however, is for the British government to make decisions that are then not understandable by the British people. It is not reasonable that we are not able to find out clear answers from British officials who are acting on behalf of the British government.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
sad to say it, Andrew, but we have found ourselves in a position where we have allowed our enemies to believe that we are not serious, where we are weak. We have allowed our allies to believe that we are not trustworthy, and the combination...
Keep right to stay on M4.
And that is why this is such a serious report, and why I'm so sad to have to write it, because, you know, the reality...
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
Our interests and defends our country in many different ways. But what we found here is, sadly, a catalogue of incidents which have led us into a position where we don't look serious. And if you want to see how much this matters, Andrew, I know that you're going to be talking to people about rising energy prices and the different pressures on homes across our country. A lot of these pressures, not all of them, but a lot of these pressures come from the fact that Vladimir Putin took the decision to invade Ukraine, putting huge pressure on energy prices because he was cutting off gas supplies and making his own administration of his own country pariah. But he also closed down effectively the export of wheat and fertilizer from a very important country, Ukraine, and indeed from Russia itself. Now, all of this comes down to a question of seriousness. Now, it's not solely the UK, of course it isn't solely the UK, but if Western countries like the United Kingdom, like the United States, don't look serious when we stand up for our allies, then others are going to test us, or not going to, or rather they're going to believe that we won't react when they take on other countries like Ukraine.
Tom, you mentioned the energy prices, and I must too. £800 increase announced today. Eye-watering and devastating for an awful lot of families. Robert Jenrick's been on the show, and he says there's going to have to be a big intervention soon. Would you, as a Conservative MP, be looking for a major intervention from the Treasury in short terms? And what kind of scale do you think it has to be?
Well, I think this has to be a very serious intervention because, frankly, we've got homes across our country who are now, at the moment, thank God, they're not. The question isn't about heat, but the question is about heating, about cooking and food. Exactly right. The reality is this is heading towards a winter, thank God, a few months off, that we can foresee serious problems caused to families across our country. And it is absolutely the responsibility of government, and our government in particular, to make sure the British people are as protected as possible. Now, there is only so much we can do. The reality is we can't change the energy price, we can't lower the price of oil, the price of gas, but we can look at the different fiscal inputs. So what I mean by that is the different ways in which we tax families, whether that's the national insurance contribution that, as you know, I wasn't supportive of, or whether that's the way in which we tax fuel itself with VAT, or indeed with windfall taxes on the energy supplies.
Let me ask you about another big story tonight, which is these extraordinary accounts by people who were there of the parties at number 10. People sitting on each other's laps, rooms crowded, debris everywhere.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
On the eve of Prince Philip's funeral, can I ask you, do you think that Boris Johnson is the right person to be leading the culture in number 10?
Look, you're right to bring up the question of culture, because the reality is the point about Afghanistan, the point about energy prices connected to the point about seriousness in government. The reality is we've got a very serious issue here. The issue is,
do we have a very serious government?
Well, that's exactly the point I'm making. There is a real problem if you are not serious, if you do not look like you're serious, if you do not behave as though, frankly, the occupation of governing the United Kingdom is possibly the most serious you'll ever have, then it does raise questions of competence, and we have to be very clear.
All right, I mean, we tiptoe around this question all the time. Can I just ask you very directly, do you have confidence in Boris Johnson tonight?
Tonight it's very difficult to have any confidence in the government, but, frankly, it's very difficult to have confidence in the government right now.
Right, Tom Tugendhat, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Now, in this gig, I do lots and lots of interviews, and a few just occasionally stick in my mind for a long time afterwards. And one of them was with Vladimir Kara-Murza, who's this very, very brave Russian opposition politician. He says he's now basically a dissident. There isn't really politics in Russia anymore. And after I talked to him about the situation there, I said, what are you going to do next? And he said, I'm going back to Moscow. I said, going back to Moscow? Surely they'll just arrest you and throw you into prison. He said, oh, maybe. I said, so why are you going back? He said, because I'm a Russian, and I can't let these people take my country away. Well, he has been arrested, and he is facing 10 years in prison. I'm joined now by his wife, Evgenia. Very, very nice to see you here, Evgenia. What's happened to your husband? Terrible, predictable and terrible. So tell me, first of all, he's been tried, and he's facing this 10-year sentence. What's his situation right now?
Thank you very much, Andrew, for giving me
In
this
a quarter of a mile,
opportunity
at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
April the 11th. On April the 26th, he was charged under this new law that was adopted in Russia on March the 4th of this year. So it means that only 9 days after the war had broken out. And that
exit at junction 6.
Any possible dissent, any opposition to Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Including even using the word war.
Absolutely. You cannot...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
And, would never, he would never look for euphemisms. Vladimir has been as outspoken as possible, as humanly possible, about his position on this war and about Putin's continuous repressions against his own population. And now he is facing up to 10 years in prison for speaking out against the aggression and for being consistent in his work. He's being kept at a pre-trial detention center in Moscow.
But if he is actually sentenced and sent to prison, what kind of conditions can he look forward to?
We never know, because we're talking about we're talking about today's Russia. There is no real justice system left in Russia, no independent justice system. So the authorities can actually do whatever they want. And the sentence is known before the court trial actually begins. So the court date has not been set for Vladimir yet. And what we believe the reason might be that they're looking for more charges to throw at him. And Vladimir has been a consistent advocate for the
exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
Criminals and murderers in Putin's regime. He has been outspoken on the problem of political persecutions and political prisoners in Russia. And of course, he's been outspoken against this war. So they might add more charges.
And they won't like that. Now, of course, he's also a British citizen. He was in Cambridge for a long time, and he's a British citizen.
In a quarter of a mile, turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
From the British Embassy in Moscow. How much help have you had, and how much more, perhaps, do you need?
Vladimir indeed is a British citizen. Our 3 kids are British citizens, and we do believe that the British government has the right, and honestly, I believe the responsibility to act on Vladimir's behalf, to act in his interests. We have received some support from the British Embassy in Russia because there was someone present at his court hearings. I would love to ask for more support and more help from the British government in my husband's case, because
turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
A victim of 2 attempts on his life in the past. In 2015 and 2017, he was poisoned.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
And we know their names, we know their faces, thanks to this incredible independent investigation by the insider and Bellingcat at Spiegel. And I have every reason to believe that my husband's life and health are in danger, because he's basically being kept in prison behind bars by the same people who had tried to kill him twice in the past.
Evgeny, your husband is a stand-up guy. He's a brave man. Some people would say he's a hero. But he's put you in a very different position. What's it like being married to somebody who is so eloquent, but also so flinty and unflinching when it comes to really difficult stuff?
It is not easy. It's not easy. But then, I knew what I was getting into. Vladimir was just the same 20 years ago when we got together. So nothing changed. He's just as principled. He's just as honest. He's just as decent, and is just as consistent in his views and in his beliefs. So I support him fully, and I stand behind him, and I'm going to fight for him for as long as it takes to bring him back to his kids.
Good for you. I hope that eventually we can make his name as well known in Britain as Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe's was. She was, after all, held by Iran, which is an unfriendly state as well, and she got back eventually. Let's hope the same thing happens to this. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me.
You're
listening to Andrew Marr on LBC, and the time is 6:48.
Coming up at 7, Ian Dale leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
Our pledge is to put more money in the public's pocket.
What about my household bills?
Feeling that cost of living crunch? La Barra are here to help. 15 gigabytes of data, EU roaming included, and no annual price rises. All for just £10 a month. Lebara. More for less. Change or cancel anytime. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Get 50% off the first 3 months until 30th of May 2022. Buy now at lebara.co.uk. Terms apply.
Life is about sharing those magical moments, and food shouldn't be any different. For over 35 years, Marouche has been perfecting this experience with their delicious food, warm hospitality, and live entertainment. Authentic Lebanese cuisine made the traditional way. Marouche, your family restaurant. Book now at marouche.com.
Welcome to everyone's favorite game show, The Motorway Way, where car dealers compete to give you the best price for your car. Okay, Val, are you ready to sell?
Very ready.
Thousands of car dealers are waiting to bid.
£12,000, £12,200, £12,500.
You sold your car.
That was easy.
Motorway, the way to sell your car. Sell your car at motorway.co.uk.
56% of customers received a higher sale price than the agreed reserve price.
There's nothing I wouldn't do for my patients. I'm a Macmillan nurse. If they want me to stay with them at night while their partner gets some sleep, they just need to say. If they want to go back home to see their family for Christmas, I'll get them there. Even if it's in the Outer Hebrides. They want to get married in bed? Done. I do whatever it takes. So asking you to donate isn't a problem either. Just visit